What happens when one of music's most outspoken rising stars comes face to face with America's sweetheart on daytime television? What we witnessed between Raye and Kelly Clarkson was nothing short of explosive. A clash that started with pleasantries and ended with a dramatic walkout that left the entire studio in stunned silence. This wasn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a collision between two completely different worlds of music and fame. Before we dive into exactly how this all unfolded, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how this escalated from 0 to 100 in a matter of minutes. The Kelly Clarkson Show was buzzing with its usual energy as Kelly settled into her chair, flashing that signature smile that had made her America's darling for over 2 decades. Across from her sat Raye, the British singer-songwriter whose raw honesty and unfiltered approach to the music industry had been making waves on both sides of the Atlantic. The contrast was immediate and striking. Kelly's polished television presence against Raye's more edgy, authentic energy. "So Raye, congratulations on your recent success," Kelly began, her voice carrying that warm, practiced tone that had made millions of viewers feel like they were chatting with their best friend. "Your album has been getting incredible reviews, and I have to say, your journey to get here has been quite remarkable." Raye shifted slightly in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, though something in her eyes suggested she was already measuring Kelly's words carefully. "Thank you, Kelly. It's been a long road, that's for sure. Now, I've been reading about some of the challenges you faced in the industry," Kelly continued, leaning forward with what appeared to be genuine interest. 7 years with a record label that wouldn't let you release your own music. That must have been incredibly frustrating." "Frustrating doesn't even begin to cover it," Raye replied, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to cut through the studio's bright lighting and cheerful atmosphere. "It was soul-crushing, actually. Imagine having your art, your voice, your entire identity as a musician, held hostage by people who see you as nothing more than a product to be molded and sold." Kelly nodded sympathetically, but there was something in her expression that suggested she was preparing to steer the conversation in a different direction. "I can only imagine how difficult that must have been. But, I think there's something to be said for the traditional system, too. I mean, labels do provide structure, guidance, marketing support." Raye's posture straightened almost imperceptibly, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift. "Structure and guidance," she repeated, her tone now carrying a slight edge. "Is that what you call it when they refuse to let you release music for years? Because it doesn't fit their commercial formula?" "Well, I think sometimes, there's wisdom in waiting for the right moment," Kelly replied, her smile remaining intact but becoming slightly more strained. "The industry has changed so much since I started out, and sometimes patience really does pay off." "Patience," Raye said, and now there was no mistaking the growing tension in her voice. "Kelly, with all due respect, you won American Idol when you were 20. You had your moment handed to you on a silver platter. Some of us had to fight tooth and nail just to be heard." The studio audience, which had been murmuring appreciatively at the conversation's beginning, fell into an uncomfortable silence. Kelly's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, but the damage was done. The friendly interview was already beginning to crack. "I wouldn't say it was handed to me," Kelly replied, her tone becoming slightly more defensive. "I worked incredibly hard on that show, and I've continued to work hard throughout my entire career." "I'm not questioning your work ethic," Raye said, leaning forward now, her intensity palpable. "I'm questioning your understanding of what it's like for artists who don't get that kind of platform, who don't have major networks betting on their success from day one." Kelly's laugh came out a bit too forced, a clear attempt to lighten the mood that was rapidly darkening. "Well, we all have different paths, don't we? I mean, look at you now. You're here. You're successful. You've overcome those challenges." "Have I, though?" Raye shot back, her voice rising slightly. "Or am I just finally being allowed to exist in a space that should have been mine years ago? There's a difference between overcoming obstacles and surviving a system that's designed to break you." The camera operators were clearly picking up on the shift, zooming in slightly to capture the growing intensity on both women's faces. Kelly was struggling to maintain her composure, the practiced ease of thousands of interviews being tested by Raye's refusal to play along with the expected narrative. "I think we might be getting a bit heavy here," Kelly said, attempting another laugh that fell flat in the charged atmosphere. "This is supposed to be a celebration of your success." "Maybe that's the problem," Raye replied, her eyes never leaving Kelly's face. Maybe we're too comfortable celebrating the survivors instead of questioning why there's so much to survive in the first place. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and it was clear that this interview was heading somewhere neither woman had anticipated. Kelly's fingers drummed against her coffee mug, a nervous tick that her longtime viewers would recognize as a sign that America's sweetheart was beginning to feel cornered. "Look, Raye," Kelly said, setting her mug down with a slight clink that seemed to echo through the tense studio. "I understand you've had struggles, but I think you might be painting with a pretty broad brush here. There are a lot of good people in this industry who genuinely care about artists." Raye's eyebrows raised, and she let out a short, bitter laugh that sent a ripple of unease through the audience. "Good people, Kelly? Do you know what my label told me when I begged them to let me release my own songs? They said I was too emotional, too raw, that audiences wouldn't connect with my pain because it made them uncomfortable." "Well, maybe they were trying to help you find a broader audience," Kelly suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. "Sometimes feedback, even when it's hard to hear, can push us to grow as artists." Raye's voice cracked with incredulity. "They didn't want me to grow, Kelly. They wanted me to shrink. They wanted me to become palatable, digestible, safe. They wanted me to become someone else entirely." Kelly shifted uncomfortably, her media training warring with what was clearly becoming a more personal conversation than she'd bargained for. "I mean, collaboration is part of the process, isn't it? Learning to work with others, finding compromises." "Compromise," Raye repeated, shaking her head slowly. "You keep using these words like they're virtues, but you have no idea what they actually cost. Do you know what compromise looked like for me? It looked like watching other artists perform songs I wrote while I sat in the shadows, invisible and voiceless." The studio lights seemed harsher now, casting sharp shadows across both women's faces as the conversation took on an increasingly adversarial tone. Kelly's usual warmth was being replaced by something more defensive, more protective of the industry that had made her a household name. "But that's the business side of things," Kelly said, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Songwriting, ghostwriting, that's how a lot of people build their careers. It's not personal. It's just how things work." "Just how things work," Raye echoed, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "Kelly, listen to yourself. You're sitting there successful and celebrated, telling me that my artistic suffocation was just business as usual." "That's not what I'm saying," Kelly protested. But her words sounded weak even to her own ears. "Then what are you saying?" Raye demanded, leaning forward in her chair. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're defending a system that nearly destroyed me simply because it worked out well for you." The audience was now completely silent. The usual energy of a daytime talk show had been replaced by something that felt more like watching a car accident unfold in slow motion. Kelly's production team could be seen in the periphery, clearly unsure whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue. "I'm not defending anything," Kelly said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. "I'm trying to have a balanced conversation, but you seem determined to make this into some kind of battle between us." "A battle?" Raye laughed again, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. "Kelly, this isn't a battle. This is me trying to have an honest conversation with someone who apparently can't handle honesty when it doesn't fit into a neat, television-friendly package." "I can handle honesty just fine," Kelly shot back, her composure finally beginning to crack. "What I can't handle is being attacked for having a different perspective on an industry that's given both of us careers." "Different perspective," Raye said, standing up abruptly from her chair. The sudden movement sent a shock through the studio, cameras quickly adjusting to follow her. "Kelly, your perspective is from the top of the mountain. Mine is from the valley where dreams go to die." Kelly remained seated, but her knuckles were white as she gripped the arms of her chair. "So what? Because I had success early, my opinions don't matter? Because things worked out for me, I'm not allowed to speak about the industry." "Your opinions matter," Raye said, beginning to pace slightly in the small interview space. "But when you use your platform to minimize other people's trauma, when you dismiss legitimate criticism as just part of the process, then yes, I have a problem with that." "I never minimized your trauma," Kelly protested. But even as she said it, both women knew it wasn't entirely true. "You did," Raye said firmly, stopping her pacing to face Kelly directly. "Every time you suggested I should have been more patient, every time you implied that what happened to me was just normal industry practice, you minimized it." The tension in the studio was now so thick it was almost suffocating. Kelly's usual ability to smooth over difficult moments with humor or redirection had completely abandoned her, leaving her face to face with an artist who refused to be managed or controlled. "Maybe we should take a quick break," Kelly suggested, looking toward her producers with something approaching desperation. "No," Raye said sharply. "We're going to finish this conversation, Kelly, because this is exactly the problem. The moment things get uncomfortable, the moment someone challenges the narrative, you want to cut away, take a break, pretend it didn't happen." Kelly's eyes flashed with anger for the first time in the interview. "That's not fair, and you know it. I've had plenty of difficult conversations on this show." "Have you, though?" Raye challenged. "Or have you had conversations where people were polite enough to disagree with you in ways that didn't threaten your worldview?" The question hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down between them. Kelly's mouth opened and closed several times as she struggled to find a response that wouldn't prove Raye's point. But it was clear the younger artist had struck a nerve that went deeper than professional disagreement. "You know what?" Kelly said, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "I think you're being incredibly unfair right now. I invited you onto my show to celebrate your success, to give you a platform to share your story, and you're turning it into some kind of personal attack on me." Raye's expression hardened, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made several audience members visibly uncomfortable. "A platform to share my story? Kelly, you invited me here to share the version of my story that makes everyone feel good. The sanitized, inspirational version where struggle leads to triumph and we all learn valuable lessons. What's wrong with inspiration?" Kelly demanded, her voice rising to match Raye's energy. "What's wrong with showing people that they can overcome obstacles and achieve their dreams?" "Nothing," Raye replied, her voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "When it's honest. But what you're selling isn't inspiration. It's a fantasy. You're selling people the lie that if they just work hard enough, if they just stay positive enough, if they just compromise enough of themselves, they'll eventually get their turn." Kelly stood up now too, the pretense of a casual interview completely shattered. "That's not a lie. That's hope. And maybe some people need hope more than they need your version of brutal honesty." "My version?" Raye laughed, a sound that was equal parts bitter and incredulous. "Kelly, this isn't my version of anything. This is just reality. The reality that most artists never get their turn, no matter how hard they work or how talented they are. So, what's the alternative?" Kelly shot back, her composure completely gone now. "Should we just tell everyone to give up? Should we crush people's dreams before they even try?" "We should tell them the truth," Raye said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "We should prepare them for what they're actually walking into instead of feeding them fairy tales about meritocracy and happy endings." The studio felt like a powder keg with both women staring at each other across a divide that seemed to represent something much larger than their individual disagreement. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply flee. "You know what your problem is," Kelly said, her finger pointing accusingly at Raye. "You're so bitter about your own experience that you can't stand to see anyone else have a different one. You can't stand that some of us actually found joy and fulfillment in this industry." Raye's face went white, then red as if Kelly had physically slapped her. "Bitter," she repeated slowly. "You think I'm bitter because I refuse to pretend that your success story is the norm instead of the exception. I think you're bitter because you spent 7 years feeling sorry for yourself instead of finding another way," Kelly said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze, as if everyone in the room understood that something irreversible had just happened. Raye's expression went through a series of changes, shock, hurt, rage, before settling into something cold and final. "Feeling sorry for myself," Raye said, her voice now eerily calm. "Kelly, do you have any idea what those 7 years actually looked like? Do you know what it feels like to write songs about your pain, your growth, your healing, only to be told that your pain isn't marketable enough?" Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but Raye held up a hand, stopping her. "Do you know what it's like to watch inferior artists?" "And yes, I said inferior. Get the opportunities that should have been yours because they were willing to smile prettier, sing safer, be more agreeable," Raye continued, her voice gaining power with each word. "Do you know what it's like to question your own worth, your own talent, your own sanity, because an entire industry conspires to make you feel like you're the problem?" "Raye, I didn't mean," Kelly started. But it was too late. "No, you meant exactly what you said," Raye interrupted, her voice cutting through Kelly's attempted apology like a knife through paper. And it tells me everything I need to know about who you really are underneath all that television sweetness. Kelly's face crumpled slightly, as if she was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what had just transpired. I was just trying to. You were trying to put me in my place, Raye said, her voice now carrying a finality that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. You were trying to remind me that I should be grateful for whatever scraps I get. That I should smile and nod and play nice because that's what good girls do. That's not true, Kelly protested weakly. Isn't it? Raye asked, tilting her head slightly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the moment I refused to perform gratitude for your entertainment, you decided I was the problem. The moment I wouldn't play the role of the thankful, reformed victim who learned valuable lessons from her suffering. You labeled me bitter. The weight of Raye's words seemed to press down on the studio, creating an atmosphere so thick with tension that it felt difficult to breathe. Kelly looked around desperately, as if searching for someone to rescue her from a situation that had spiraled far beyond her control. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Raye continued, her voice building to something that wasn't quite shouting, but felt more powerful than any scream. This is how the system works. As long as I'm willing to package my trauma into digestible, inspirational content, I'm welcome at your table. But the moment I suggest that maybe the system itself is the problem, I become the angry one, the difficult one, the bitter one. Kelly's face had gone pale, her usual television confidence completely shattered as she struggled to find words that could somehow repair the damage that had been done. Raye, please. I think we've both said things we didn't mean. Maybe we can just... No, Raye said, her voice cutting through Kelly's desperate attempt at reconciliation like a sword through silk. We can't just anything. This is who you are, Kelly. This is who you've always been. The difference is that most people are too polite or too intimidated by your success to call you on it. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, some covering their mouths in shock, others leaning forward as if afraid they might miss a single word of this unprecedented television moment. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every nuance of what was clearly becoming one of the most dramatic talk show confrontations in recent memory. You sit up here in your perfect little studio with your perfect little career, dispensing wisdom to the masses about perseverance and positivity, Raye continued, her voice gaining momentum like a gathering storm. But you have no idea, absolutely no idea what it's like for the rest of us who don't get to skip the line. I never skipped any line, Kelly protested. But her voice was weak, defeated. You won a television show at 20 years old, Raye shot back. You were handed a record deal, a management team, a marketing budget, and a built-in fan base of millions. If that's not skipping the line, then what is? Kelly's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles white with tension. I worked for that. I earned that. Did you, though? Raye asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more devastating than shouting. Or were you just lucky enough to fit the mold they were looking for at exactly the right moment? The question hung in the air like a death sentence, and for the first time in the entire interview, Kelly had no response. Her mouth opened and closed silently, the reality of Raye's words hitting her with visible force. And now, Raye continued, her voice building again, you have the audacity to sit here and tell me that my 7 years of artistic imprisonment was just part of the process. You have the nerve to suggest that I should have been more patient, more grateful, more willing to compromise my soul for the chance to maybe, possibly, someday get a fraction of what was handed to you on a silver platter. Raye, please, Kelly whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Please what? Raye demanded. Please stop telling the truth. Please pretend that your success story is something other than a fairy tale built on privilege and timing. Please go back to being the grateful victim who learned valuable lessons from her suffering. The production team could be seen frantically gesturing from the sidelines, clearly torn between stopping the interview and letting this historic moment play out. The studio lights seemed to pulse with the intensity of the confrontation, casting dramatic shadows across both women's faces. You want to know what bitter looks like, Kelly? Raye said, her voice now carrying a finality that made everyone in the room understand that something irreversible was about to happen. Bitter is watching someone with your platform use it to perpetuate the same toxic myths that nearly destroyed me. Bitter is realizing that even now, even after everything I've been through, I'm still expected to smile and be grateful for the scraps. Raye began moving toward the edge of the interview area, her body language making it clear that she was done with this conversation. Done with this show, done with all of it. But you know what? I'm not bitter about. she said, turning back to face Kelly one final time. I'm not bitter about walking away from people who mistake their privilege for wisdom, their luck for hard work, and their comfort for truth. Kelly reached out desperately, as if she could somehow physically stop what was happening. Raye, don't do this. We can work this out. We can. We can what? Raye interrupted, her voice filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. Pretend this didn't happen? Edit it out. Spin it into another inspirational story about overcoming differences and finding common ground. She shook her head slowly, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. No, Kelly, some things can't be fixed with a commercial break and a group hug. Some truths can't be packaged into feel-good television moments. With that, Raye turned and began walking away from the interview area, her footsteps echoing through the stunned silence of the studio. The cameras followed her movement, capturing every step of what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about moments in daytime television history. Raye, please, Kelly called after her, her voice cracking with desperation and what might have been genuine remorse. But Raye didn't turn around. She didn't pause. She didn't give Kelly the satisfaction of a final dramatic confrontation. Instead, she simply walked off the set with her head held high, leaving behind a studio full of stunned faces and a host who finally understood that some conversations can't be controlled, managed, or tied up with a neat bow. The cameras lingered on Kelly's shocked face for a moment before cutting away, but not before capturing the single tear that rolled down America's sweetheart's cheek as she realized that her perfect television world had just collided with someone else's uncompromising truth. What did you think about this explosive confrontation? Did Raye go too far, or was Kelly completely out of line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more dramatic celebrity moments, and let us know which side you're on in this incredible clash between two very different perspectives on fame and success.